a very warm welcome from the UK and greetings to today's webinar. We've got myself, I'm Ramsay Melhuish. I head up the education and professional development team at Pickatale. And we've also got my colleague, Alistair Cameron, who many of you know and have dealt with in terms of partnerships. And we're really excited to be able to be talking about today's topic, which is unlocking critical thinking and implementing effective reading interventions. And this is a real area of interest for me in my days in the classroom, really about how we use questioning and how we really try and get the children, the students, to get a deeper understanding of what they're reading, whether it's subject-based or whether it's reading for pleasure. So without further ado, I think I'm going to make a start. It's almost coming up to 8 minutes. So that's 4 minutes past 4 if you're in the Philippines. So just firstly, a few house rules. So most of you have been automatically muted. If you are able to mute your mic, that would be fantastic. If you're not, that just stops the background noise. Great if you can turn your camera on. It's lovely to see your faces. We have the chat feature as well. And please keep your messages relevant to topic. I've just noticed the questions coming up about a certificate of attendance, and that will be absolutely provided afterwards, either by the partner in your region or through us directly. Occasionally people experience technical issues, in which case we just recommend refreshing your browser or just leave and then rejoin. And that usually solves any of those particular requirements. And the webinar is being recorded, so we'll make that available afterwards. So without further ado, let's dive into unlocking critical thinking. So in our session today, we're going to look at a number of key points. So what and why is critical thinking important for young readers? We're going to dive into some current research into critical thinking skills challenges in today's age, where the role that a multifaceted reading platform can help promote critical thinking. And I'm thinking again with STEM here, and particularly able to access different types of genres and text types of books. We want to encourage deep and dynamic discussions around text. This is, again, the roots of critical thinking. We're going to use Pickatale as a platform, as well as look at physical books in here, as well as other methods of delivering reading within the classroom. And particularly, we're going to look at personalized books, and that's Pickatale Create. And then finish off with trying to build lifelong reasoning skills through reading, as well as ongoing Q&A. So let's dive in. What is higher order thinking for learners? So critical thinking is the part of higher order and lower order thinking skills that uses analysis and evaluation to help make judgments. Critical thinking goes beyond memorization. In other words, they need to understand connections and the deeper ideas. Key components include questioning assumptions, examining evidence, considering different perspectives, identifying biases, and then problem solving. And these are all relevant in real life as well as within school itself. But why is critical thinking so important for young learners? It enhances academic performance across all of the subjects. It develops confidence in personal opinions and decision-making. It prepares the children for real-world challenges, and we're going to talk more about this later on. It fosters creativity and independent thinking. It helps children evaluate information in today's media-rich world. And it also, and probably most importantly, supports brain development and cognitive growth. So how have students' thinking skills in 2025 become even more relevant with regards to the introduction of AI? And we're all aware of how this is going to have an impact in all our lives, but particularly thinking about students of the future. So thinking about the UK, and I'm based over in the UK, as well as Alistair, a 2025 study found that younger students aged 17 to 25 who frequently relied on AI tools for decision-making and problem-solving exhibited lower critical thinking scores. This phenomenon, known as cognitive offloading, suggests that over-reliance on technology may hinder the development of deep thinking skills. Then there was a comparative study of lower secondary school students in England that enrolled on the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Programme that emphasises critical thinking, and they outperformed their peers in national curricula. These students demonstrated higher critical thinking proficiency due to interdisciplinary inquiry-based approaches, which we'll talk about later. Then there's the Cambridge assessments, which evaluate critical thinking through problem-solving, reasoning, and analysis tasks. These tools highlight gaps in students' ability to apply critical thinking across various contexts. And then, interestingly, research shows that whole class discussions around issues such as sustainability can really help support critical thinking by encouraging pupils to engage with different epistemological levels. That's the theory of knowledge. And this approach promotes dialogue and reasoning around complex topics. So these will all be supplied in the slide deck afterwards. Moving across to a more global approach. So higher order thinking skills is about moving beyond the basic recall of information to use knowledge in new situations, to analyze, to evaluate, and to create. And this is a part of the Malaysian Education Blueprint 2013 to 2025. And they've really recognized that this critical thinking skills is going to be paramount to their student success and academic prowess. Now, in 2022, for the first time, PISA assessed students' capacity for creating thinking across the 64 countries. These results revealed substantial variations in performance based on socioeconomic status, gender, and school characteristics. It highlighted disparities in fostering higher order thinking skills globally. So we know it's not a level playing field according to the different countries and socioeconomic factors of each student. And then coming back to the rise of AI tools and digital platforms has led to this cognitive offloading where individuals rely on technology instead of engaging deeply with the information. And this trend has been linked to declining critical thinking skills amongst younger generations globally. And then referring back to the PISA quote, students from disadvantaged backgrounds often lack access to quality education and resources that promote higher order thinking skills like analysis, evaluation, and creativity. So ultimately, we've got to try and address critical thinking in all the areas within school life. That's all subjects, all topics. But obviously, you're going to be integrating it within literacy and reading. And this is where we're just going to introduce you, if you're unfamiliar with Pickatale, just to how we take you through. So students, when they're preschool, have begun to get some phonemic awareness. They've begun to understand words, but they haven't necessarily understood the meaning. They're listening to the sounds of the words more than anything else. And then by introducing them to phonics, they're going to be able to link those letters and sounds, and that's a two-way process. So they'll be able to recognize a word as well as write it down. And then integrated into that, and this is the core part of today's session, is the idea that they've got to be able to understand what they've read or what they've heard. And that's going to be introducing through the higher order and lower order critical thinking skills. They're going to access perhaps vocabulary to really then dive deeper into a deeper understanding, and particularly regarding synonyms and antonyms, etc. They're going to look at different text types and choices. And again, those STEM books that I've mentioned before, as well as dive into different genres and so on. Now, ultimately, by the time they end up coming up into high school, they're going to be able to read to learn confidently. And in essence, we've got this ecosystem that takes them from learning to read to reading to learn. There are 8 stages within Pickatale, and that's from the very emergent reader at a stage 0 to then the more confident reader by the time they reach up to stage 6. And that takes non-native from ages 3 up to 12 plus. And we try and align to the very broad bands within the CFR. Ultimately, though, teachers have a responsibility in lessons and in class, and equally in the general day-to-day running of a school, to try and integrate these higher order thinking skills, so that's HOTS, question types, into their day-to-day teaching practice. Now, I'm sure many of you do these without even thinking about this. But ultimately, I thought it would be useful just to write down some of the techniques that were certainly useful for me in the classroom. So whether it's asking ranges of questions, whether you start off with a simple question, what happened in the story? And then slowly you progress to more complex ones. Why do you think? So explanation, a character made a choice, or how would you change the ending? Again, encouraging them in their creativity and imagination to think of alternative scenarios. You model and teach questioning. You encourage students to use key question words. We used to call it the 5 W's and an H, and I'd have them on the side of the classroom. Who, what, why, where, when, why, and how. And then once the children have got the hang of them, to them really start expressing their opinions. I think ... because. And again, that really gives them agency, it gives them ownership over their own thought processes. You may need to use scaffolding and support. That might be the case of providing sentence starters, language frames to help all students. And I'll talk briefly about, we've got worksheets that may well help with this at the end, especially those who are beginning on their English language journey. So in that case, lower English proficiency. So I agree because, another idea could be, what if? And then you then start going into suppositions, etc. Then you encourage reflection. And I think this is a really key part. It comes into well-being and citizenship. We really want students thinking about their own emotional journey as well as what they're doing academically. So we want to ask questions about what did you learn from this activity? How might you look at it differently? And this can really help students internalize these critical thinking processes. And they'll start doing it naturally after a while. Imagine though that you're very young, you're teaching perhaps kindergarten or some of the younger grades, and you want to be able to use different stimulus to start with these critical thinking skills. So you might have some really lovely physical books in your classroom, picture books, that you want to get the children out and then really examining what might be happening within the story. So I've got just an example on the page of a nice picture book. So we might be discussing about the rainbow, the colors in it, how many birds are on the page, whether we've got the moon present in the background, why it might be for an older child symbolic to have the river running down the spine of the book. What types of animals have we got on here? What's the surface of the surface that the book is on? In other words, we can come up with all types of open-ended questions, some closed as well, regarding where students might be able to gain some real insight and depth of understanding regarding a particular image. So picture books can be a fantastic way to really start introducing these critical thinking skills. Then moving over to Pickatale, we've got the ability to be able to create and also access picture books for the younger students. So whether it's using to create, write a book about things that are blue, and this could be just a simple page by page book, different examples, whether it's blueberries, blue jeans, blue jays. In other words, they really start identifying elements that are really going to resonate with them within a story. Or indeed picture books. I've got a lovely example, Lots to Spot in the Ocean, where if I just click on it, I'm going to open up just Pickatale here now. And what we can do is we come straight into the book itself. So I'm just going to click reading and just zoom in a little bit. What you'll be able to see is that we've got different question types all around the outside. They've got to find different animals within the story. In other words, they're starting to become little detectives regarding what would be happening within a particular book. And these, again, can be a great stimulus for getting the children to really think about what they're going to be reading and what that story might be about. So I thought, again, why if we move on from picture books as we go up through the grades, STEMs, that's science, technology, engineering, and maths, can be a fantastic way of promoting critical thinking skills. And there's a large number of different books of this type within Pickatale itself. So again, we're not going into a platform walkthrough, but if I went to the search page, I search for activity books. In this case, I've just featured stages 3 and 5, and I've placed in one of our publishers, Arcturus, and I really recommend you look at these books carefully. So whether it's for the younger books, younger readers, so that's the wild animals and the dinosaurs in the ocean, lots to spot. Whether you've got the puzzle adventure series, and these again have got key questions as you go through, or indeed linking into STEM, the science adventure series, Space Quest, Body Odyssey, Agents of Energy, etc., all linked in to curriculum areas, but promoting critical thinking skills. And this is the key thing. You want the children engaging as they read through the book, which leads us nicely to these puzzle adventure stories. So these are great. They're a bit like the choose your own adventure. They have key questions at each point. You have to use your analytic skills. You have to use your deductive skills, and they're self-directed learning. The answers are at the back of the book, so children can always go in and check and find out how they've got on. But as they work through the book, they've got to solve puzzles at each part. So do recommend, as I say, some of the STEM content within Pickatale. These can be really key for critical thinking. And then what might be useful to have a look at is what critical thinking skills question types are there in quizzes that the children or the students take after reading a book. And all books from stages 1 to 6+ have an integrated quiz at the end. And that's 5 questions, but they're very direct questions. And these really tie into exactly the topic that we're talking today. So when a child and when your class completes quizzes within Pickatale, the data, the statistics, and the results get fed back into the teacher dashboard, but they get fed back into particular comprehension question types. So the first type is there will always be a question where they have to explain what happens in the text. Again, one of the key critical thinking areas. The harder one perhaps is inference. What's the message behind the text? What's the hidden story? What can you infer from what's written in terms of particular sentences? Excuse me. And as you can see, my class is struggling a little bit with explain and inference. Then there'll be a retrieval question. So what can they remember from the text? There'll be a sequence question for the younger learners. And so that's stages 0 to 2. And that will be placing something in order. For the older readers, there'll be a summarized question. And again, really good for getting a deeper understanding of the whole topic. And then finally, and again, recognizing this is all part of the whole multifaceted approach, a vocabulary question. Can we get them to develop an extensive vocabulary that will help them explain their reasoning better? And all the time, you're just going to get results from week in, week out. So to say, do use the comprehension quizzes to help reinforce those higher order critical thinking skills. Some of you may be familiar with the Pick a Stage books. And this is a dedicated category that we've got within Pickatale. And what I love about it is it allows the same topic to be read by all the learners in your class, e.g. from the less confident to the more confident. But then when you get to the question types afterwards, again, they're differentiated. So I've got the book, Leonardo da Vinci. I've got the same book, but it's stage 2, 3, and 4. So again, different complexity in terms of how it's written. But when I complete the questions, for example, the inference question for the stage 2 book might be, why might Leonardo da Vinci have unfinished paintings? By the time it gets up to stage 3, why is he considered a genius? And then a different style of question, why did Leonardo design a mechanical lion? So these all can be integrated into your day-to-day teaching, and then you look together at a class at the different styles of question. Or it could be explanation questions. Why did Leonardo's invention of the helicopter suggest? Or what does it suggest? What was the relationship between Leonardo's love of art and science? And finally, for the higher level, why does the author emphasize Leonardo's varied talents? So you can see you've got a whole breadth of different styles of question that can really help the children understand the text even deeper. Moving on. We've now got to the part where we're going to start thinking about how do we create personalized books that ultimately encourage discussions around text and that will develop critical thinking. As I say, you've got a huge library you can access, but you've also, as a teacher, got the ability to be able to create a book from scratch. And this can really have massive impact. It can help engage a disengaged reader. It can help with reluctant readers. But equally, it can help stretch your more able readers. because you've managed to link into a topic that they're going to be really curious and engaged with. So again, I was having a think about this. We can really help promote CLIL, the cross-curricular learning through stories. Because we're going to create the book from scratch, we can edit and publish it. We add the narrator, so we get the audio element to it. And then I can translate it into multiple languages. And then the students can read it at home or in school. So when we want to think about creating a bespoke book for our student or for a class, we need to initially think about what the purpose or desired outcome of this book is. Are they going to be learning about a topic? Or are we going to be introducing key questions at key points? We're going to think about the age of the students, whether it's the younger ones or the older ones. And then what critical thinking skills should we include in their story? Whether it's lower order thinking skills or higher order thinking skills, or indeed just a mixture of both. So what I'm going to do before we create a book is just talk you through the way that I've processed the ideas for this. So I was thinking about for the younger readers, and imagining that a child, perhaps, and again, I can personalize this to their name, should I wish, but they've got a birthday party coming up, but that we want to create a story where they have to try and think about the process of constructing and then developing this story, this party. So, thinking about the prompt, I've got written down a story about problem solving a birthday party. The students are asked to predict an outcome for each part of the story as they finish each page. So what we're able to do is we're able to click on Pickatale Create. It will open us up straight into Pickatale. And as you can see on the left-hand side, I've got my library, search, classes, statistics, that's where the comprehension quizzes were, and book creator. And what I'm going to do is just place in this particular prompt. So I'll just zoom it in so everyone can see it. And I've gone for quite a broad prompt here, a story about planning and problem solving a birthday party where they've got to predict the outcome for the end of each part of the story as they finish each page. I'm going to start it off in English, but I can translate it into multiple different languages. And then I can choose the age range that they're going to go for. So I'm going to click go to next step. I'm just going to zoom back out, and then I'm going to think about the different image types. What is it that's going to resonate with my particular class? And in this case, I think a nice watercolor will suit that particular cohort of students. I can then go through the different voices, and whether it's an American English voice, whether it's a UK English voice, you choose the one that's really going to help support them in particularly understanding this story. So in this case, I might choose Alice. It's a nice UK English voice, and I can listen to it beforehand.
With Pickatale's book creator, everyone can become a storyteller.
So I'm going to go to next step. Now, while this has been happening, as you can see, a book has started to be created. So we're going to come into here, and I'm going to call it, what should we do? Class 6 birthday party in paradise. So in other words, I can edit every single part of this to my heart's content. If I want to come on, I can edit the background image, I could re-prompt it, I can then get something personalized for that particular one, as well as develop these critical thinking questions. So I'm going to move just onto the editing side. And as you can see, I can place in whatever text I want. I might want to link it into some other subjects, etc. But in this point, I'm just going to briefly guide you through it. So there was a girl named Emily who wanted to have a birthday party. She made a list of friends, she counted them carefully, but then she imagined all her friends coming to the party. And then we've got this higher order thing. So what do you think will happen next? So I open up that to the students before moving on to the next page. So she needs to choose a theme for her party. She's finding jungle things, and then we're going to then predict what's going on in there. So again, the different games, we're going to go into the food. And again, I'm getting the children's opinion at the end of each story, each page. So we're going to move to the next step. The book's now going to be packaged and published. I can then share it with my class either as an assignment, and then I just share it out to them. That then now appears on their particular device, whether it's at home or in school. In this case, I'm going to select all students. But before that, I might want to translate it, I don't know, into Indonesian, so I can have a multilingual version of this book. And again, I can edit to my heart's content. I can add in additional questions if I've got a particular area I'm focused on. In other words, I have full control. So I've now got two versions of the same book, one in Indonesian, one in UK English. I'll come back to the UK English one. I can equally share it with my other colleague teachers, so we don't then save teachers time, but we can really come up with a whole school approach regarding critical thinking, and then come straight into the story itself and read it at the front of the class with the audio narration. And in this case, we can then have a listen to it and then really
Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Emily who wanted to have a birthday party.
So as you can see, I can slow down the audio if, again, it's getting at the speed that's relevant for the students. So do think about carefully how you might create content that will then integrate different thinking style questions within a story. And you are the editor, you are the publisher. Thinking about it, I then imagined for the older students, I'm thinking 10, 11, 12-year-olds, grade 6 or so, why not help them understand what critical thinking skills is? So I went for a more involved prompt in this case. Create a story explaining critical thinking in simple terms and its importance. Include sections on key skills like analysis, evaluation, and creation, with relatable examples and real-life applications. And then the final page has a reflection section, encouraging students to think about what they use these skills in their real life. And this again is a different slant on it. Treat the children like young adults, help them understand what it is that we're trying to talk to them. And so again, I've got this reading detective idea. Why not let them go off on their own reading journey? And so again, if I choose to, we can then become really key regarding what it is with analysis, evaluation, creation, science. We're going to link into topics, etc. Sports, I might link into some students. And then ultimately this idea of reflection and so on. So I hope you really find creative ways, pardon the pun, to use Pickatale Create to be able to really develop these thinking skills for your young learners. So ultimately, though, we want to be able to build lifelong reasoning skills through reading. That's our aim. We want children to be able to go up into high school, into young adult, into higher education with the ability to be able to analyze and reflect. So we often talk about Pickatale talk time or Pickatalk time. And this is a dedicated time, often in the school day, where you can really think about what types of questions you might introduce to the students. So open-ended questions, the idea of encouraging students to think beyond yes and no simple answers. That promotes analysis and reading. Reflective discussions you've heard us talk about, to review how they have approached a task. What might they change or adapt next time? They've then got facts and opinions, teaching students to differentiate between fact and opinion, even more valid in this media-rich world today. Interactive prediction. What do you think will happen next? What's your reasoning about it? What happens if it goes in a different direction? In other words, encourage that imagination, that curiosity in a child to really develop their ideas, which leads us nicely to the fifth one, curiosity connection, the idea of independent thinking, valuing these diverse perspectives and allowing children the freedom to make mistakes. And that really encourages them to really develop their own critical thinking styles. In terms of a whole class or whole school approach, and again, this is feedback from different teachers, you could create a culture of inquiry within your classroom. We had an inquiry board on the side where we had key questions coming up and then topics that we wanted to dive into. And that can really help develop an active process of questioning and exploration. And really, again, reflecting as reading detectives. I love this idea of reading detectives. Get the children really thinking deeper about what they're reading and so on. You can use collaborative activities, debates, role-playing, include group discussions based on book themes. Some schools organize book clubs focused on analysis and debate, engage deeply with the text through thoughtful analysis. You could have a whole school-wide initiative, potentially using Pickatale books or potentially physical books using the library, but on critical thinking themes. We have a whole series on the Sustainable Development Goals and innovation and invention. And then ultimately, we have to try and think about positive reinforcement. So can we celebrate students' achievements in critical thinking? And then perhaps you might want to present certificates at the end. And again, we'll show you where you can access these. So hopefully, whether it's ideas just on an individual student level, class level, or indeed school level, you're able to instill a culture of critical thinking and deeper reflection. We have what we call Pickatale worksheets, and these again could be useful scaffolded prompts with the keywords in there. So what can we learn from the text? I understand that, ... Can I predict what's happening? I think something will happen because of something. Can I visualize it? And this is often a great way in for certain kids, perhaps who are struggling with this particular task, is what can I see, hear, taste, smell, or feel? And again, getting them thinking on a deeper level. And then making connections. And we've talked about that before, where you can then link ideas. So I know something because this happened or this didn't. So again, reach out and we can then supply these worksheets. But ultimately, again, rewarding children. So we'll have downloadable reading detective certificates, and we talk about critical thinking superstars. They're fantastic reading detectives. And again, this can really incentivize kids to want to then go deeper into reading as they go on. So to conclude this webinar, what we've covered today, and as I say, we'll come over to the Q&A shortly, is what and why is critical thinking important for young readers? The current research into critical thinking skills challenges, and that's particularly relevant in this day of AI beginning to have a place within both the workplace and within school. The idea that a multifaceted reading platform can help promote critical thinking, whether that's through STEM, quizzes, etc. What we can do as teachers to encourage this deep and dynamic discussions around text, really help children dive deeper. And then potentially create books that will then foster this critical thinking skills, whether that's on a student level or on a class level. And then probably most importantly, how do we build these lifelong reading skills through reading? And again, that's something they will take with them throughout their life. And so perhaps just to conclude, I'm just going to come over to it. Oh, thank you, Jareen. That's fantastic feedback. We will be doing a follow-up webinar in about 4 weeks' time. We're looking at how audio enhances learning with Pickatale, and the link will be up on the website in the next few days. But again, we're going to look deeper at how to use audio, particularly really to support children in terms of their understanding of the language orally. So I'm just going to hand over to Alistair here. Has there been any interesting questions while I've been monologuing away?
And try and remember to unmute myself. Hi, Ramsay. Thank you so much for a really engaging webinar. It's great to see so many people engaging with this and with you on the topics. I think, looking specifically at the Matatag curriculum in the Philippines, that there are so many strong links and the importance of reading and technology in raising standards and higher order thinking. So I'm really hoping that today's session has been particularly useful for you there, and that it resonates with you, and some ideas have come across as to how we can raise students' cognitive thinking. In terms of questions on the links, we did actually explain, yes, there will be the slides available, but a very good question was, is it possible to get access to the research and reports that were mentioned earlier on? And we'll make sure that that does get linked through on the presentation when it gets sent out to you as well. I haven't seen any other questions that have come through yet on the chat. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask us any questions regarding either Pickatale or our thoughts and ideas, or any further suggestions on higher order thinking skills, please do use the next few moments just to pop it on the chat. It's easiest to do it there, and we'll try to answer your questions. But in the meantime, what I would like you to do and recommend you to do is just pop over to pickatale.com, and from there, in the next few days, you'll be able to see a list of the webinars that are coming up and be able to register for those.
Thank you, Alistair. And as I say, if questions come up after this session, feel free to reach out to us at schools@pickatale.com with any specific requirements or queries, and we'll happily get back to you. But as I say, thank you so much. It's so humbling seeing so many of you on this webinar, and really, really appreciate you taking your time out of the afternoon. And thank you. Much appreciated the feedback. That's very kind.